You must always expect the unexpected when you step into our world. From shocking plot twists to heart-pounding endings, we bring you drama redefined for the modern age of digital cinema. Click subscribe now and get ready for your next big thrill.
My husband looked at me the way you look at something you've already decided to throw away. I need you to understand something, he said, setting down his fork with the kind of deliberate calm that meant he had rehearsed this. I've been thinking about this for a while. You and I, we're not the same anymore. I've grown. My world has expanded. And honestly, sitting across from you at this table every night, I realize you don't belong in the life I'm building. You never really did. I didn't move. I kept my hands folded in my lap, the way I always did when I was trying not to react. I'm not saying this to be cruel, my husband continued. I'm saying it because you deserve the truth. You're comfortable. You're fine. But fine isn't what I need standing next to me at partner dinners and client events. I need someone who fits. And I think, deep down, you know you don't. He picked his fork back up and continued eating. I sat across from him in the dining room of the home I had spent 4 years making beautiful, and I said absolutely nothing. That silence was the most important decision I ever made. My name is Claire, and I am a nurse practitioner. I work 12-hour shifts in a cardiac unit. I have held the hands of people in the worst moments of their lives. I have delivered news that broke families apart and stayed in the room afterward because someone had to. I am, by any reasonable measure, not a woman who lacks competence or presence or worth. But when my husband, Daniel, the man I had put through the final 2 years of his MBA program, the man I had moved cities for, the man whose networking events I had attended in heels that destroyed my feet after 10-hour shifts, when he told me I didn't fit his life, I believed him for exactly 47 seconds. I know it was 47 seconds because I counted. A trick I learned in nursing school for staying present during chaos. You count. You breathe. You do not let the room swallow you. At 48 seconds, something shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't ask him what he meant or beg him to explain or tell him how much I had sacrificed. I simply looked at him across that table, this man I had loved for 6 years, married for 4, and I made a quiet, private decision. I would give him exactly what he asked for. Daniel had taken a position as VP of Business Development at a private equity firm 8 months earlier. The salary jump was significant. The lifestyle shift was immediate. Suddenly there were dinners with managing directors, weekends with people who had summer houses, conversations about wine vintages and golf handicaps and which neighborhoods were still worth investing in. He bought new suits. He got a different haircut. He started using words like optics and ecosystem in casual conversation at home. I noticed all of it and said nothing, because I was working nights that month and sleeping in between and trying not to let exhaustion make me imagine problems that weren't there. But the problems were there. They had been there quietly for about 2 years, I think, in the form of small comments that I filed away without examining. The time he introduced me to a colleague at a restaurant and said, "She's in healthcare," with a pause before the word, a pause just long enough to communicate something. The time his new friend Marcus asked what I did and Daniel answered for me, quickly, and then steered the conversation somewhere else. The time I came home from a brutal overnight shift and he was on the phone with someone, laughing. And when he saw me he said into the receiver, "Sorry, my wife just got in a tone that implied I was an interruption. I filed all of these away. Then came the dinner table. And the 47 seconds. And the decision. I want to be clear about what I did next, because it has been misunderstood by people I've told this story to. I did not go cold. I did not plot. I did not stay up nights engineering his downfall. I simply stopped. I stopped rearranging my schedule around his. I stopped researching the neighborhoods he wanted to move to. I stopped listening to podcasts about finance and private equity, so I would have things to say at his dinners. I stopped pre-reading the restaurant menus online so I could order confidently and not slow down his colleagues. I stopped performing. What was left, after I stopped performing, was a woman who woke up early on her days off and sat with coffee by the window and thought, for the first time in years, about what she actually wanted. The answer surprised me. I had been turning over the idea of becoming a nurse practitioner, no, further than that. A doctor of nursing practice. My supervisor had suggested it twice in the past year. My hospital had a tuition assistance program I had never used because there was always something else to manage, always something of Daniel's that needed my attention more. I pulled up the program website on a Tuesday morning while Daniel was at the gym. I read for 2 hours. I filled out the preliminary inquiry form. I requested information about the evening and weekend cohort. Then I closed the laptop and went to my shift, and I thought about it the whole drive there. At home, things had become very quiet. Daniel seemed surprised by the quiet. He had expected, I think, some reaction to what he'd said at dinner. A conversation. An argument. Tears, maybe. Something he could respond to, shape, manage. Instead, I was simply there. Present. Pleasant, even. I asked about his day. I made dinner on the nights I was home. I did not, however, arrange my day around his anymore. I did not text him updates on my whereabouts. I did not check in. Is something wrong? He asked about a week after the dinner. No, I said. Should something be? He looked at me for a moment. You seem different. I'm tired, I said, which was true. I was always tired. He had just never noticed before. He nodded slowly and went back to his laptop. I watched him for a moment from the kitchen doorway. This man who had once driven 3 hours in a snowstorm to bring me soup when I had the flu during my clinical rotation. This man who used to leave notes in my coat pockets. I mourned him briefly, the way you mourn a version of someone who no longer exists, and then I went to the bedroom and I read the DNP program curriculum until I fell asleep with my phone on my chest. I applied to the program on a Sunday in November. I had not told Daniel. He found out when the acceptance letter arrived, actual paper, in the mailbox, and he brought it inside and set it on the counter and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. What is this? I got in, I said. To the doctoral program. I start in January. He was quiet for a moment. You didn't mention you were applying. You've been busy, I said simply. Claire. He said my name the way you say a word when you're trying to find the right follow-up and can't. This is when would you do this? You already work full-time. We were talking about moving. I've been looking at houses in. You've been looking at houses, I said. I didn't look at any houses. He stopped. I think, I said, keeping my voice very even, that you told me a few weeks ago that I don't fit the life you're building. So I've been building mine. I folded the acceptance letter carefully and took it to the bedroom. I need to tell you about my colleague Priya, because she is important to this story. Priya was a cardiologist on my unit. Brilliant. Efficient in the specific way that people who grew up with very little become efficient, nothing wasted, every action purposeful. We had been friendly for 2 years but became genuinely close that winter, when we started carpooling on the days our shifts aligned. She knew about Daniel. She had seen me rearrange a shift once to attend one of his networking dinners, and she had said, carefully, "Is that something you want to do or something you feel like you have to do?" I had said I wanted to, and she had nodded in a way that suggested she didn't entirely believe me. After the dinner table conversation, I told her what he had said. She was quiet for a full minute. We were sitting in the hospital parking garage at 6:40 in the morning, in her car, still in our coats. "What did you say back?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "Nothing. Nothing." She nodded slowly. "Good," she said finally. "The worst thing you can do to a man who expects a reaction is give him none." I thought about that for a long time. The first semester of the DNP program, I was exhausted constantly. I studied on my lunch breaks. I read research papers at red lights, which I know is unsafe and I am not recommending it. I asked my supervisor for a schedule adjustment and she gave it to me without hesitation, which was the first moment I understood how much professional goodwill I had accumulated over the years without realizing it. I was good at this. I had always been good at this. I had just been spending so much of my capacity on maintenance, on managing Daniel's world, on making his life run smoothly, on being presentable and appropriate for his new ecosystem, that I hadn't had any left for my own ambition. With that weight lifted, the capacity returned quickly. I was also, for the first time in years, sleeping well. Not the crashed, dreamless sleep of someone who has overextended themselves past endurance, but real sleep. Restorative. I woke up most mornings before my alarm. Daniel and I were still living together. This confused people when I told them later. We occupied the same apartment in the same city and sometimes sat in the same room and occasionally exchanged information about logistics, like two professional colleagues who happened to share a lease. There was no shouting. There was no dramatic confrontation. There was just the slow, dignified completion of something that had already ended. He brought flowers home once, in March. Tulips, yellow. He set them on the kitchen counter and said he thought they might brighten things up. I thanked him and put them in a vase and arranged them carefully because I was not going to let flowers go to waste just to make a point. He watched me do this with an expression I could not read. "I've been thinking," he said, "that maybe I said some things a few months ago that weren't." "Daniel," I said gently. "I'm studying tonight. I have a presentation on Friday." He nodded. He went to the living room. I went to the second bedroom I had converted into a study, and I worked until 11, and I did not think about yellow tulips or what he had been about to say. I want to tell you about the moment I almost went back. It was April. I was sitting in the hospital break room at 2 in the morning after a very hard shift, the kind that takes something from you that takes a few days to return. We had lost a patient I had grown attached to. An older man who reminded me of my father, who had been doing well and then wasn't, quickly, the way cardiac patients sometimes go. I was sitting there alone in the fluorescent light, and I was thinking about how tired I was, not just physically, and I found myself thinking about Daniel, the old Daniel, the one who used to drive through snowstorms, who left notes in coat pockets. I found myself wanting to call him. Not to fix anything. Just to hear a voice that knew my history. I sat with that want for a long time. I didn't pick up my phone. Instead I texted Priya. "Still here. Hard night." She replied in 4 minutes. "I know. You're okay." That was enough. I drove home at 4 in the morning and I did not detour toward anything I had already decided to leave. In May, Daniel told me his firm was sending him to New York for 3 months on an extended project. He would be back in August. "Okay," I said. He looked at me. "I thought maybe we could talk. Before I go. About where things are." "Where are things?" I asked. Not hostile. Genuinely curious what he would say. "I don't know," he said. "That's the problem. I think you've known for a while," I said. "I think I've known for a while. I think we've both been very polite about it." He sat down heavily on the couch. This man who had grown so comfortable in boardrooms, who had learned to command a room, looked in that moment like someone who had arrived at a destination without a map. "I didn't mean what I said the way it came out," he said. "I know," I said. "And then, because I wanted to be honest and not cruel. But I think you meant some of it. And I think I needed to hear it, actually. Because it made me stop waiting for our life to become what I needed it to be. And I started building something instead." He was quiet for a long time. "What did you build?" he asked. "I'll let you know when I'm done," I said. He left for New York on a Sunday. I helped him carry 1 bag to the car, and we hugged briefly, and that was that. The next 14 months were the most demanding and most clarifying of my life. I finished my first year of the DNP program with the highest marks in my cohort. My clinical supervisor submitted my name for a Departmental Innovation Award for a patient monitoring protocol I had redesigned on my unit, and I won it, quietly, and put the plaque in my study. My hospital offered me a lead practitioner role in the cardiac department, which came with a title adjustment and a salary increase that I did not share with anyone except Priya, who hugged me in the corridor and said, "I told you," with the satisfaction of someone who had been waiting to say that for a while. I moved into my own apartment in August, while Daniel was still in New York. The process was clean and unemotional in the way that endings are when they have already actually ended long before the paperwork. We divided things without lawyers because there was no real animosity. There was just completion. My new apartment was smaller and quieter. I painted one wall a dark green because I had always wanted a dark green wall and had not done it because Daniel didn't like dark walls. I bought a coffee maker that I chose entirely for myself. I built the IKEA shelf in the living room by myself, badly, and it leaned slightly to the left, and I loved it. I started sleeping even better. I heard from Daniel in October. Not a call, a text, which felt right for where we were. He was back from New York. The project had gone well, the promotion had materialized, the life he had been building was apparently built. He hoped I was well. He wanted to know if I would want to get coffee sometime, just to talk. I thought about that text for 3 days. Then I replied, I'm glad things went well. I'm in the middle of a big stretch with school and work right now. Maybe in the spring. He replied. Of course. I understand. I set my phone down and went back to the research paper I was drafting, which was about improving early detection outcomes in post-surgical cardiac patients, which was the thing I was actually spending my life on. Spring came and I did not reach out. Neither did he. And this felt, to both of us, I think, like the right answer. I graduated from the DNP program on a Saturday in May. My mother flew in from Ohio. Priya sat in the third row with her husband and twin daughters and held up a sign that said Dr. Claire in enormous letters that was technically premature because I was receiving the doctorate but had not yet completed my board certification, and I laughed so hard when I saw it that the woman next to me turned to look. I crossed the stage in my regalia and shook the dean's hand and received the document that represented 3 years of pre-dawn study sessions and missed social events and cold coffee and something I had not expected, which was a complete reconstruction of my understanding of what I was capable of. My mother took approximately 400 photographs. Afterward, we went to dinner at a place I had chosen, and I ordered whatever I wanted without thinking about optics or fit or whether it was the right thing for someone else's ecosystem. I ordered the salmon. I had a glass of wine I actually liked. I sat with my mother and my best friend and her family. And I thought about the dinner table 4 years earlier, and the 47 seconds. And the decision. The decision to stop explaining myself to someone who had already decided what I was worth. There is a postscript to this story, and I include it not for the satisfaction of it, but because I think it is important. 6 months after I graduated, I was asked to consult on a pilot program being launched in partnership between my hospital system and a private equity-backed healthcare investment group. It was a significant opportunity. I dressed carefully for the first meeting and walked into a conference room downtown and sat across from 3 people I did not know. One of them was a colleague of Daniel's. I recognized him, Marcus, the one at the restaurant years ago, the one who had asked what I did. He clearly recognized me a moment after I recognized him. And I saw the recalibration happen in real time across his face. Dr. Harrison, the program director, said, using my title. We've heard excellent things. I thanked her and opened my folder and got to work. Marcus said very little during the meeting. Afterward, in the corridor, he stopped me briefly. Daniel mentioned you were doing something in medicine, he said. He didn't. He paused. Congratulations on the doctorate. Really. Thank you, I said pleasantly, and I meant it. I harbored nothing toward Marcus. He was just a person at a meeting. I walked to my car in the November air, and I sat for a moment before starting the engine. I did not feel triumphant, exactly. Triumph implies the other person still matters to the outcome. What I felt was something quieter and more permanent. I felt located. Exactly where I was supposed to be, having taken exactly the path I was supposed to take, for no reason other than that I had chosen it. Daniel had told me I didn't fit the life he was building. He was right. I didn't fit it. I was never going to fit it. I was always going to build my own.